Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mayvar Tagar. Welcome to our 284th Never Trusting a Politician episode of Mandivision. I'm your host, Nargai Tom. Thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. So glad you're here with us. Reach out to us on the socials. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandivisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Buckethead Nation, welcome back. We're here for another exciting Star Wars Rebels rewatch episode. But of course, there is a little bit of Star Wars news to discuss, and I wanted to get to something that was sent to me via a friend of the podcast. Sent me a link from Discussing Film on Twitter that says Rey is set to play a role in several Star Wars movies that are being developed. It's unclear which one will come first. Now, I don't want to put too much stock into some of the things we get read onto us on the internet, but I'm going to speak in very broad terms because, you know, while I haven't gone into great depth of my feelings on the sequel trilogy, I probably have let enough slip out that would allow you to know that I'm not the biggest fan of episodes 7, 8, and 9. There are things that I like in them. There are things that I don't. And it made for a mixed bag for me, without getting into specifics in greater detail. One of the things I don't really have a problem with are the characters that were in the films, particularly in this instance, Rey. I think Rey is a character full of potential, a lot of possibilities there. And if they are going to make this a character who sort of has the narratives of a new saga driven through her, sure, like, fine. I'm not opposed to it by any stretch. Let's see what the story is, because by and large, like I said, it wasn't the characters that were the issue necessarily for me in the sequel trilogies. It had more to do with the, in my opinion, haphazard way in which the stories were told. The sort of slapdash effort made for a supposedly cohesive narrative didn't work for me. But it's not Rey's fault. That's not Finn's fault. That's not Poe Dameron's fault. I'm okay with these characters moving forward. Let's just do something new and different and take Star Wars to some new places instead of retreading familiar territory. That's all I'm looking for out of anything moving forward with Star Wars. Again, I don't think we'll ever be free of a period where we're spending time in the era of the Empire, the rise of the rebellion, these timelines that are so popular and tried and true. But again, I'm going back to my Baskin Robbins reference. There are many flavors of Star Wars out there, and they don't all take place at the same time. You know, you can have your 31 flavors, but you don't need to eat them all at once. So that didn't come out quite the way I was hoping it would. But again, I want Star Wars to branch out. Tell me new things, and let's have some fun while we do it. And that's really all I have to say about that. More Rey is fine by me. And again, if you want to make Rey the character through which the narratives flow through, fine by me. Let's see how those stories work, and let's have some fun with Star Wars. Let's do it. Some other bit of information that has come out recently was Disney Plus releasing another little teaser for things to look forward to in 2025. And through this teaser, which gave us snippets of various shows that will be on Disney Plus and Hulu in 2025, we got our first look. Those of us who did not go to was it D23 or Celebration or any of those, we got to see some actual Andor footage for season 2. And the big takeaway from that, which I'm sure you've all heard about, it lit the internet on fire. The revelation of the TIE Avenger being now brought into the canon from the old PC flight simulator classic TIE Fighter and its various sequels. I've mentioned before on the podcast, big fan of those old flight simulator PC games from back in the 90s, and TIE Fighter was exceptionally awesome. Very, very cool game. So I'm excited. I'm here for it. I want to see how they incorporate it into the narrative for Andor. I think you all know what a big fan and supporter I am of the Andor series. So yeah, let's go ahead and bring more fun stuff into Andor for him to play with and possibly steal and thwart the Empire in some fashion. It'll be interesting to see if they sort of keep the story of the TIE Avenger similar to what we had in the old expanded universe from the games. We'll talk probably more about that in detail next year when we get a chance to see what they do in Andor with it. Again, there's plenty of articles already out there on the internet that show that history from the EU. If you want to get into it, they do exist. I'm not going to go down that lengthy rabbit hole right here because, again, so many people have already posted up about it. And by the time you listen to this podcast, you probably know what you need to know. So, again, generally I'm excited. I like it when they incorporate elements of the old expanded universe, and this is no exception. All right? So I think that covers just about all of that. So now we can buckle down and get into our Star Wars Rebels rewatch. So let's go ahead and get the episode particulars out of the way. This is Star Wars Rebels Vision of Hope. Season 1, Episode 12. Original air date January 26, 2015. Written by Henry Gilroy. Directed by Stephen G. Lee. Our primary cast for this week's episode. Taylor Gray is Ezra Bridger. Vanessa Marshall is Harrison Dula. Freddie Prinze Jr. is Kanan Jarrus. And Protocol Droid 1. Tiara Sakar is Sabine Wren. Steve Blum is Zeb Orielos. Alton Castle. And the Stormtrooper Commander. Dave Filoni is Chopper. David Oluwayo is Agent Kallus. Brent Spiner is Gal Travis. Kath Soucie is Minister Maketh Tua. David Accord is Protocol Droid 2. Matthew Wood is a Stormtrooper. And Brighton James as Zer Leonis. And there you have it. Our plot for this week's episode. The crew of the Ghost try to thwart an Imperial plan to capture an exiled dignitary. There may be more to that than we've been led to believe. We'll talk about it. We're ready to go. I hope you're fired up, Bucketheads, because you know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off.
You're going to have to relocate the covert.
This is the way.
This is the way.
And our episode opens on Lothal with Ezra engaged in some lightsaber Jedi-style training. We have Zeb and Sabine and Chopper firing blasters at Ezra while he engages in redirecting them, deflecting them. Kanan wants him to redirect the blasts, but thus far, Ezra's only able to deflect away and send the blasts willy-nilly through the air, where Kanan lets him know that that's not really the point of this, and that's not always a good idea, just to bat blaster bolts away to hit others and to hit other things that may cause irreparable damage to something that maybe they don't need to have damaged. There's actually a Stormtrooper helmet that Kanan is hoping Ezra will be able to bat the blaster bolts into. And that's sort of the target. And again, we get a lot of the familiar back and forth between Kanan and Ezra as Kanan is urging him to concentrate, to focus, to open up to the Force. to do all the things that we know a Jedi should do. But what I think is really fun about going through Ezra's Jedi training this time around, for so many of us, depending on your age bracket, obviously for myself and many people in my age group, we grew up seeing Jedi training through Luke. We went through the Jedi training as Luke went through it. That was our first experience with it. So we were learning about it as Luke was. Now, for people in my age bracket, we are seeing Ezra go through it, but we sort of understand the messages and what they're trying to get Ezra to learn, so that when what happens next happens, we the audience know more than Ezra does, and we're more in Kanan's shoes when it comes to a Force vision and how to interpret a Force vision, and realizing that emotion can cloud your interpretation of said Force vision, which is basically what this episode is all about. Because as Ezra opens himself up to the Force, he sees a vision of the future. He's been, as he had told Kanan previously, he was slightly distracted. He knew that Gul Travis was going to issue another hollow message today, another show of support for rebels across the galaxy to defy the Empire. And he was waiting for that message, and it was causing him to not do well on his lessons for the day. But when he does open himself up and he sees that vision of the future, much like Luke did on Dagobah, there's a lot of things left to interpretation. We get a little bit more of this back in the Clone Wars when Jedi characters would have visions of the future and how they would react to it. If you read through Kevin Scott's Doku Jedi Lost book with Sifo Dyas and his visions of the future, and seeing that how heavily emotion can be involved in not only the way we interpret those visions, but also how that can drive them to come true in the way that we didn't expect them to. And that is what's happening here too, because by the time this episode plays out, everything that Ezra saw in his vision does come to pass, but the context is completely different from what Ezra thought it was going to be. And so instead of, like the episode is titled, Vision of Hope, it's more of a vision of the cruel realities of the galaxy. And that is that this person that the rebels, that the Spectres have looked up to as sort of like a symbol of hope and someone of significance, being openly against the Empire and their tyranny and their rule. Instead, it turns out that it's simply a trap. It's a device the Empire is employing to lure insurgents, to lure rebels out of hiding, so that they can be identified and tracked and monitored, and then, if they seem to be causing problems, disposed of very quietly, so that Gul Travis's again, his role as bait can go on from planet to planet wherever he goes, luring out opposition to the Empire so that they can be identified. And again, as we talked about in the last episode with Lando, how Hera was the one who was sharp enough and on her toes enough to keep up with Lando and his fast evolving plan of deception, deceit, and we'll stop at deception and deceit. It's Hera who's the one to realize that Gul Travis is not all he says he is, and that something doesn't add up about what's going on here. It's a fairly straightforward episode in that regard. The infiltration of the old Lothal Senate building, the escape, the arrival of Callus, and when he calls, when he identifies Ezra as Padawan Jabba, from dating back to Spark of Rebellion episode, where Kanan called himself Jabba, where Ezra referred to himself as Jabba the Hutt to Callus when asked to identify himself. So like nice callbacks to that. Callus arriving with these awesome forces. Um, the Senate protocol droids, the Senate colored protocol droids, based on some old Ralph McQuarrie artwork. Uh, the show has so many fun little Easter eggs in it, and again, it's showing us a time just before Luke and Leia and Han and everybody like that. So I enjoyed this episode a lot. The tactics that we get to see the Empire employ in their effort to smoke out dissidents across the galaxy. It shows that the Empire is paying attention and that they are doing their best to very quietly snuff out those who would oppose them. And again, it's an important lesson for Ezra because again, we are in the position of knowing that this isn't going to go the way he thinks it's going to go. He's clearly emotionally invested in Gul Travis and the message that he thinks Gul Travis stands for. So it's a shock to the system. And then, of course, Gul Travis drops the knowledge that he's aware of Ezra's parents and who they were and what they were doing when the Empire took them away. So, again, it gets very personal and very emotional for Ezra once again. But they come to their senses and they just cut bait and realize they have to escape. And they leave Gul Travis behind. Now, I did want to mention, I think we talked about it in the episode when Gul Travis's holomessages were first beginning to appear. Voiced by Brent Spiner. Very well known for being Commander Data on Star Trek. One of the few crossover actors to be in both Star Trek and Star Wars. His look, obviously based off of David Niven, just like watching Bridge Over River Kwai, right? Isn't it? You know it is. And just for any so there's no confusion, Gul Travis not a senator from Lothal. He's from Osk Trill. So don't get it twisted. All right. I don't know why I said Bridge Over River Kwai. I meant Guns of Navarone. Silly me. But anyways, so there's a sort of element of hope being snatched away from the Spectres and the Rebels, but they seem to rally really quickly around the fact that like they're still together, they make their escape, and they're gonna move on and go forward with their plans to do what they've been doing against the Empire. That this is a bit of an emotional setback, but not a devastating one, and we're not surprised by that, but it is sort of funny how the betrayal doesn't hit quite as hard, and I think it's because this is their first interaction with this character in real life, and so the idea that it was actually part of Imperial deception, again, sort of rings true because, again, who's trusting politicians these days? And the episode ends on a somewhat abrupt note. They make their little jokey jokes, Kanan and Ezra, but then Hera and Ezra have a moment where they wanted to believe in Travis and his message because they want to believe in hope. Again, we're going back to Star Wars and hope. And the name of the episode, Visions of Hope. So there it is. But they still have their hope because they still believe that what they're doing is the right thing and the important thing. And that's basically the episode. There's some fun stuff with Chopper. There's some fun stuff with the escape. We get to see Sabine doing some cool things. We get to see Zeb doing some cool things. Again, a very enjoyable episode. Not filler at all. It's much like the last episode. I'm sort of torn. I want to give it those 8 buckets. But, if you're more of a cynic, it's probably closer to 7. But I'm going to go 8. I'm going to give it an 8. Because I like what it says. I like this show putting us, having us witness Ezra's training, but knowing what we know, knowing that he's not interpreting the vision correctly, knowing that emotion is clouding his judgment. I like those elements of it. I like seeing the training done this way. Again, when we got to see Jedi training in the Clone Wars, it was very formal. It was very through the temple and so many masters and so many Padawans and apprentices and all this history and legacy. And, Kanan is taking what he knows and kind of throwing it at Ezra on the fly and doing it in a very different fashion than a Jedi we've seen to this point. But what I like is us having the perspective of knowing that it's about patience and training, and you have to take the emotion out of these things. So getting to watch Ezra take these first steps, but to kind of stumble through them, I think it's a rewarding experience, a rewarding journey. And so I enjoy these episodes quite a bit. Like I said, 8 buckets from me, friends. And that's where I think we're going to put a pin in it for this week, because I've got nothing left to say about this one. Very solid. Check it out. Another one of these building block episodes for who Ezra is and who he will be moving forward, as his hope is tested by his belief in a man, Gall Travis, and how it isn't returned. It's faked out. And then that little bit that he drops about his parents. Ooh, they just keep turning the knife about the parents. Anyways, we'll talk more about them down the road. Don't worry about it. All right, Bucketheads, you know this already, but if you're new to the show, this is the Mandovision Podcast. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and I appreciate every single person taking the time to check out our small independent Star Wars podcast. It means the world to me that you've taken time out of your day to listen and support this show. Truly, truly appreciate it. Reach out to us on the socials. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, another great way to support the show. Sweet 5-star reviews. They help us stand out and not get lost in the intergalactic shuffle that exists. All right, Bucketheads, go out there. Continue to be great Star Wars fans. We're rolling into the holiday season. It's Star Wars gift giving time. What Star Wars gift is on your wish list this year? Let me know. What are you guys looking at? There's always options out there. There's always fun things to do, fun things to get. I'd love to hear about some of them. Hit me up on those socials. You know where to find me. The email is always great too. All right, Bucketheads. Again, be great Star Wars fans out there. Now's the time. Skeleton Crew right around the corner. And we'll be here to talk about all of it with you guys. All right, go be safe. Stay safe. Be awesome. Be great Star Wars fans. All right, Bucketheads, remember. Sorry, I'm blowing it. Remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
I suppose you'll be heading out.
I'm not.
You should.
It's against the creed. I gave you my word. I'm with you until we both fall.
You really buy into that bantha fodder?
I do.